Well, hey, Adrienne, thank you so much for coming on the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast. I am very excited to chat today.
I'm so excited to be here, Emily.
Yeah, we connected through like this mastermind that we were in, and I was like, oh my gosh, parenting coach. We all need help with that. Like, I always joke that I save money for my kids' college fund and simultaneously for their therapy fund because because I think they're going to probably need it because I definitely always need some help. And
We
we're
all do, Emily. We all do. Even the coach herself needs help. So,
well, that just makes you more relatable, which I appreciate. That's one of the things I appreciate about you. And I would love it if you could just introduce yourself, tell us about you and your family, how you serve parents, and maybe like one thing you like to do for fun.
my name's Adriane Thompson. I have a company called Raising Kids with Purpose. I have three neurodivergent boys, and that's kind of how I got into this work. Honestly, I was thinking about this morning, though. I have been interested in human behavior and the way people show up in the world at a very young age. I remember when in ninth grade, I read this book for fun. It was all about genomes. I was so excited to share it with my friends. They did not think it was as exciting as a 14-year-old girl reading about genomes. However, I had a pretty fixed mindset about my intelligence because I didn't test well on standardized tests. I got straight A's just because I killed myself to be a high achiever. And, like you said, your kids have a therapy fund. I wish my parents had a therapy fund for me because I paid a lot for therapy as an adult. No, I'm kidding. It's not their fault. And so through therapy, I've learned why I was such a high achiever. However, I had this fixed mindset that I was not very smart. And so I did not pursue psychology or human biology or anything that I was really interested in. I ended up going to school for communications, which I do use my degree every day in the work that I do. And so, but over time, especially after I had my first son, I just started diving into behavior specifically, the way the brain was developed. Someone on Instagram, it was a photographer I followed at the time because I used to own a photography business. She had posted a picture. She was on a plane. I remember it very clearly, a picture of The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. I read that book and it literally changed everything. So, especially because my oldest was just so hyperactive and he was running into walls and no adult could help me. They just kept telling me not to let him do it, but not a single person asked, why is he doing this? And then we had our second son. And if he did have formal diagnoses, he'd probably have lots of different, he has his brain is definitely different than a neurotypical child. And then our youngest, we did things a little different with him, but he definitely has some neurodivergence as well, and some sensory challenges. And so that's what I do is I come alongside parents and help them understand the why instead of just trying to stop the behaviors. We figure out, why is your child running into the wall trying to knock themselves out at night? Or why are they climbing everything or having these big meltdowns or tantrums? Or even, why are they talking back? Or I'm working with a mom right now who just feels like her kids won't listen. And I'm sure that probably resonates with a lot of moms listening to this podcast. And so instead of just trying to stop that behavior or getting them to listen and getting frustrated in the moment, I really invite parents to look underneath the behavior and figure out, why is it that they're not doing the thing that you're asking them to.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. And I must say, in my own parenting journey, I've had to look a lot, which is pretty normal, with some therapy too, like how I was parented. And it was very much like you just accept whatever my parents say, and I do that thing. And then I get the praise, and then, rinse
Hmm.
and repeat. And so when my kids talk back and my kids don't immediately do the things that I've asked them to do,
Hmm.
that's brought up a lot in me where I've sought out resources. And I very much appreciate your root cause approach because it
Mhm.
is easier. It's more frustrating, but it's easier to just be like, okay, I'm just gonna, you know, fight the behavior and what I perceive as like the issue and go from there. So I know that my audience can definitely learn a lot from you, and we're going to be linking to all your amazing resources in the show notes. But I, especially with having three neurodivergent boys, I'm sure you have likely recent examples of where
Yeah.
you've been overwhelmed in motherhood because you can have the knowledge and you can have the experience that you do and still be challenged and still be frustrated and still kind of come against some of these things. And I was wondering if you could kind of bring us to one of those examples, kind of what was going on and how you were able to kind of overcome that overwhelm, like by shifting something, whatever it might be.
Yes, very recent, just this week. I was just having a conversation with God. I told him, I think I have enough experience to work with the families that I work with. I do attract families who are raising kids with really big, hard to understand behaviors that may or may not have diagnoses attached, or there may be some undiagnosed things going on for the parent as well. And so I have this week, especially, I have been given a lot of experience in this. I was reading your questions beforehand. I said, "Oh, yep, I was very overwhelmed this week." So my middle son is going through puberty, and with that, lots of hormones, just with any kid going through puberty. But then we have autism partnered with that. And I just never realized, first of all, how hard it is for the child. And I started researching and listening to things about especially girls. I mean, there's a lot of changes that happen already, but then you don't fully understand what's going on, and you have all these changes, even just like the physical changes, the emotional changes. He has never really cared or maybe not understood that he's different, and now he is, and he's becoming more aware. We were just at a play place yesterday, and he tends to wear like golf shirts because he likes the material, and he usually wears them with athletic shorts. And he was the only kid there wearing a collared shirt, and he was looking around, and before he would just not let that bother him, or he just didn't notice. And thankfully, I did have an extra t-shirt in the car, and he switched it, and then he had a blast and had fun playing. And so with him and all the changes that are happening, we saw a lot of big meltdowns from him. And I'm not talking about just tantrums. There's a difference between a tantrum and meltdown. Meltdown is when the brain is so incredibly overwhelmed and it's super flooded with probably cortisol and adrenaline. And when they're in fight, it is pure fight. There is no access to the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is where we have logical thinking, rational thought. And this is why I had to learn to look at the root cause, because if I'm trying to stop it or use logic or reasoning in those moments, I'm just pouring gas on the fire and making those behaviors way bigger. When he was younger, I could pick him up. For him, I needed to get him into water or get him into like deep pressure. And then we would start to see the connections back to the frontal lobe. He would come into regulation. It was hard though, because there were a few times where he unintentionally was just so, his body was just so out of control that he almost broke my wrist. Um, I would, get hurt, and I didn't have the skills and the tools and the knowledge to know what to do in the moment. But again, he was a lot smaller. Now, he's 120 pounds. He's eye level with me now. And we went for about 4 years without any big meltdowns because he started gaining tools. And we had him on, got his brain chemistry good with supplements and using a psychologist. And we haven't had her at our house for 4 years. It's been great. Now I'm seeing these repeat behaviors but again, in a much larger body. And so just this week, I mean, it's been happening over the last couple of months. And for him, it is technology. And this is a really common issue. I mean, with all kids, but especially neurodivergent kids. And it's one of those when they use it, they get the stimulation that they need. But when they don't, they're producing so much dopamine and adrenaline and norepinephrine. And so that makes it really hard for them to regulate. So, as you're listening, I'm wondering, has your child ever freaked out when you took the iPad away, or have they ever? So think of that times 100. And so I was away this weekend. And my son is also very, very, very intelligent. And he bypassed all admin rights, all parental control rights. He memorizes code. He knows now he's like learning how to use AI. And so we have to restrict it, and not that we want to, but we have to. And so I was gone, and my husband was not feeling well and was kind of in bed for the couple of days. So we came home and his brain was just so flooded. And it was really, really challenging couple of days. And I was extremely overwhelmed. That's a really long story, but I share it because I think it's authentic and real. And maybe there's a listener here that is going through something really tough with their child, and to help you feel like you're not alone. And so I was extremely overwhelmed because, again, my safety was at risk, and his safety. And we have other children, and we have a younger son. And I mean, he like was just so out of not himself at all. Frontal lobe was completely offline. That, being trapped in my room and grabbing, and I mean, we're working with a psychologist, we're working with crisis, like we have lots of supports here. And so we got rid of the computer finally. It's gone, and he's been regulated ever since. So that's what I did, is lean in on my support systems. Met with the psychologist on Saturday morning. She helped me understand a little bit more. We're adjusting like what supplements we're giving him. We found a really awesome saffron that's helping with the regulation. And then for me, I have been doing a lot of meditative walks, lots of deep breathing exercises, all the things that I practice with my clients. And actually, it's really helpful because I always start my sessions with a grounding exercise. And I think it's just as helpful for me because it's making me practice that as well, while I'm doing it with them, and visualizations and getting really good rest and sleep. Because those days I was so flooded, probably with cortisol, it was hard to sleep. So just all the self-care things, to be able to access my own frontal lobe so that I can be there for him.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that because I'm a mom of I'm a neurotypical mom mothering neurotypical kids. And a lot of women in my community are not neurotypical, and then they have children that are not as well. And so when they come to me and they're like, I am feeling so overwhelmed, my house is a mess, there's all this stuff going on, it has there's even more going on because of those nuances and challenges. And some of the things that you were mentioning was just kind of about some of the supports that you have, the tools you have, kind of these like anchoring things that help you when this dysregulation is happening, whether it be with you or whether it be with your children. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today is defining family values and living by them, which may not seem related, but I do think it is because when we have those as anchor points in our lives, then we can go back to things like that when things are not normal, when there's kind of sort of
Well,
like the
even
craziness going on. Yeah.
during it, we have a family value of safety.
Hmm.
So instead of me matching that, or, calling him names or doing all these things, and we have a family value of kindness. So there's so many things integrated, even in the moments of overwhelm, that can still be that anchor point to get you through that. And then, like you said, then we have that home base to return to.
Yeah, and I think when we're overwhelmed as moms, sometimes when we hear these things, it's kind of like, oh, it's just one more thing to do, and I don't have time to do it. And just in your experience, why do you feel like defining and then living out these family values are so important, especially when we're overwhelmed moms, so that we're not thinking that it's just like one more thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely, because it gives you a compass. Here's a quote from Kelly McGonigal of the book is The Upside of Stress. It turns out that writing about your values is one of the most effective psychological interventions ever studied. In the short term, writing about personal values makes people feel more powerful, in control. So that's the opposite of overwhelm, proud, and strong. It also makes them feel more loving, connected, and empathetic towards each other. And it increases pain tolerance, enhances self control, reduces unhelpful rumination after a stressful experience. And so I mean, that encompasses why it's really, really important is because there's so many benefits that outweigh that, oh, I don't have time. And already I would push back on that because you already have values. You're already living them out. You may have just never written them down or really thought about them. I would guess that you just off the top of your head, you could, or top of your mind, you could think of 5 values that you see lived out every single day in your house. I don't think it's necessarily one more thing, it's just bringing it to light and then helping you be able to talk about it and constantly point to the values. So when I teach about boundaries, setting boundaries, rules, limitations, is always attached to a value. And then that's going to help the child really develop a strong sense of identity. And eventually they're going to create their own values, but they need somewhere to start.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about kind of my current experience with my boys that are 7 and 9, and my 7-year-old takes after my loving husband. Love him so much. But he's a questioner. He questions everything. Like he likes his facts, he likes his data. And Sean, my youngest, it's just everything is why, so why can't I watch TV now? And why can't I do this now? And
Mhm.
I don't do the because I said so, because I know that's not helpful. But I do provide what I think are valid reasons, and there's still the pushback and the pushback. And eventually I get very dysregulated because I'm like giving what I think is a legitimate reason. But I think it's really important, especially in my own life and family, that they understand we're all part of the same team and we're here
Mhm.
as a family unit, and there are things that are important to us as a family. And so, just a quick example, we were out for most of the day. We come home, and my oldest son was asked to go to a sleepover, like then, like right now, on a Sunday night. And I was like, no way. And for me, some of these things, like as family values, would be okay, well, we're going to get enough sleep. We're going to be rested so we can, have fun the next day. And it's not that we can't spend time with our friends, but there need to be, like you said, some boundaries supported by this value that we're going to be taking care of ourselves so that we treat
Mhm.
each other with kindness, another value. And so I think they're old enough that they can kind of understand that, like, okay, our family is a team and we have some of these things that make us a team and make us who we are. And if you can point back to those things, then it's just, again, those anchor points. And then your
Mhm.
kids have, no matter their age, they have language around it. Like they can actually
Yes.
like touch it. So I would love it if you could talk about that, and then also like how we get started in actually figuring out what our family values might be.
Before I get to that, I want to ask you when he's asking all these questions, what value is coming up for him, do you think?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh my gosh. He tells me that he just wants to know the answer. He wants to understand. And
Curiosity.
curiosity. And when he has gotten really frustrated and like not so much pushing back in the like just to push back, but when we actually calmly kind of try to ask questions and get to the root of it, he's just like, Mom, I just want to understand. Like, I just want to know the answer. And for me, I'm like, oh, okay. Like he's not doing it to be this like belligerent kid. Like he's actually genuinely curious. And my husband's like, yeah, I know that's how I am. I'm like, okay, but again, going back
Yeah.
to I grew up with your parent says such and such, you listen, you move on. And
Right.
my oldest is more like that. And that's been a super big challenge for me to see that as part of his like strength and part of his value system
Yes.
instead of something where he's disrespecting me. That's been my
Right.
issue.
And that's huge. That's something that almost every parent I work with struggles with is this disrespect. And I'm putting it in air quotes because disrespect is what we're labeling that behavior. And that brings us back to what I started out with is that we look at the root cause. He values curiosity. I'm also guessing he values creativity. And there's lots of things there. So if we look at it from that way, you just said it. I don't feel disrespected. And because that's not disrespect. He's asking questions because he's truly, genuinely curious and wants to know why and not just do the thing. I would also probably guess that he has maybe a high sense of needing or uh, a sense of agency and a high need for autonomy. And so instead of just someone telling him what to do, he's not just going to follow that because he's needing to maybe have some control. And I'm hearing that you probably need some control as well. So then that's why it becomes more of a power struggle instead of let's work. Because I heard you say that one of your core values is teamwork. So how can you then see this when he's asking all these questions as you're on the same team and how can you collaborate in that instead of you're fighting for control, he's fighting through control through questions, and then it kind of becomes a car accident instead of I always say, let's invite the child into the passenger seat instead of us coming onto a head-on collision. And it's because it might be a collision of a value. So I love that you're already thinking about these things, but now it's retraining your nervous system to not go into a stress response whenever that happens. And it sounds like you're already doing that work and because it all starts with awareness.
Well, first of all, thanks for my free coaching session.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. So, everyone, you're getting an example of what you would be getting in a coaching session with Adrienne because I've never worked with her before. And I'm like, I never thought of it that way. That's really important.
I
Okay.
love it.
So,
Okay, so what
obviously,
was the
yeah.
question you asked me?
So we're going to go through the steps of how we
Okay.
actually, besides being aware and kind of looking at some of these things like, what value might that represent? Or like, what are some things that I think are important to me, like kindness or teamwork? Like, what would you recommend? Sort of a brainstorm phase at the beginning while you're
Yeah,
figuring it out?
I encourage families to have family meetings. We try to have family meetings, but again, with kids who have demand avoidance, I didn't talk about that, but basically, they have a very, very high need for autonomy and agency. And that's why that came up for me. And so, with any kind of demands, and sometimes family meetings can seem like demands, so it's challenging, but we have gotten creative and we make it into a game night, and then I'll throw out some things. But if you can make it fun, and if you don't do regular family meetings, you can do a pizza night. I had a family, they did this with their teenage kids. Actually, they have a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old, and they had never discussed their family values before. They didn't know if the kids would be on board with it. They did a make your own pizza night, and then the mom got fun markers and poster because I do have a poster that you can print out and use, but she did a big poster board so that they could hang it up in their living room and printed out the list of values, which is in the toolkit that will be available for our listeners as well. And they had a fun night and discussed what each of their values were. And then they came together and figured out what their family values were. So, yeah, there's some questions you can ask yourself. And this is in the toolkit as well to guide you to figure out what your family values are. What qualities do you value in other families or in the TikTokers you follow? No, I don't know. Or and the Instagram influencers you follow. What are the qualities that you value? What are you finding yourself attracted to? And this goes for all the kids. This isn't just about the parents creating values. This is like you said, coming together as a team and allowing everyone to feel heard and seen and understood because at the core root, that is every human's developmental need is to feel seen and heard and understood. So this is a really great practice and exercise to do that. Another question is, how do you want everyone to feel when you're at home? Do you want everyone to feel sad or jealous or scared because everyone's screaming? Or what is that feeling? What does that look like? It reminds me of is a hygge or whatever in Denmark, just that
Oh,
coziness feeling. That's what I long for. And some days we have that. How do you spend your time together and how are you spending your time apart? Are there character flaws in each other that drives you crazy? Or are there the asking questions that you're like, why is this driving me crazy? He's just curious. And then getting to that root cause. And then what do we find ourselves repeating over and over again? What are you constantly finding yourself telling your kids to do over and over again? And that might help you figure out what those values are. Maybe it's being on time because you find yourself telling them, get your shoes on, get your shoes on, get your shoes on, because you want to make sure you're on time. Well, that might be connected to a value of, you know, uh, to respect other people's time and whatnot.
yeah. I love that. And actually, one of the things that we've been trying to implement is just like looking at contributing to the house and being able, instead of doing like chores, right, having that more
Mm-hmm.
of that contribution mindset. And I feel like that would be something that would make sense, contributing to our home, but also to the world around us. And I know that you mentioned like having it visible. I mean, once it's been kind of discussed and then we have some of these ideas and the kids are on board and everyone seems pretty happy about it. Obviously, reinforcement is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So, besides maybe having it like visible in the kitchen or the living room, once we have the family meeting and kind of decide, okay, this is something that we're going to do, we're going to have our family values, like I wouldn't say it's the easy part, but it's maybe the easier part than actually like reinforcing and living it out. So, what have been some of your personal tips and tricks, or how do you guide your clients on being able to be consistent with that?
Well, first of all, to really remember what your own values are. That's why I like to hang them up too. It's not just for the kids, it's for me to remember what we decided as a family. And it's going to shift as your kids go into different seasons and different ages and different stages. As I mentioned with my son, he's starting to recognize certain things that he didn't recognize before. And so his values, I'm sure, are changing. And so then just keep pointing to them. So if something happens, we can talk about them. You can create a fun song about your values. You can do a fun little handshake. Rituals are really, really great. It helps us as humans feel as if we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Do a little fist bump or a little, a little dance. We do a lot of dance parties because that's the way we connect as a family. And just keep mentioning them. Like I said, it's really helpful to have them hanging up. And then the toolkit, I have a sheet before the poster and it walks you through. It's like define your family values. And then how are you going to live out each of these values? With contribution, what came to mind for me is not just contributing in the house, but are there service projects that they can engage in? Are there volunteer opportunities in the neighborhood or in your community? When my oldest was 8, that's how old you had to be to go and read to the homeless children at a homeless shelter in Phoenix. Oh my goodness. We had read books about these things. We had talked about serving and giving. We had run book drives. We had donated to local shelters. Him sitting with these kids and seeing that some of them didn't have shoes on, some of them, their hairs were super, super matted, or just listening to them. And he's reading to them. And honestly, the way the program is set up, when they walk in, the kids gravitate to the kids because they look like them and that's safe versus these big, scary adults. And so he had 4 kids coming and wanting him to read to them. And he was just learning how to read himself and just we got in the car. He's like, Mom, we need to do this every week. This was the best thing ever. So we can talk about contributing and we can talk about service, but actually getting out and living out those values. So there's a whole section on there. What do each of these values look like in action, and get them to come up with ideas. Don't just be the driver of the ship. Is that the right? I never get phrases right. The person leading the charge, because let them lead the charge too. And maybe that's a family value of yours is leadership. What does that look like? How can we be leaders in our community? Or maybe it's finances is a strong family value and frugality. Okay, what does that look like? Let's all get our, different envelope system or something that where you can live that value out in real life, not just talk about it.
Yeah. I'm just also thinking at nighttime, I usually lay with my youngest and we do songs and prayers and everything. And just maybe thinking about, oh, how did we live out our family values today? Like kind of giving, some examples, not maybe of every single one, or
Right.
just bringing to their attention, like, wow, that was really great what you did for your brother today. You were really showing our value of kindness and just being able, again, to bring that to front of mind, not only kind of in that planning and the execution, but then also the reflection of like, what did I, do today? And we can do that for ourselves too, how we're living
Yeah.
out those values. And I know that my kids, they always love when I'm asking them, but then they want to know from me, like, well, what about you, mom? And being able to be involved in that also kind of improves communication and then also can help reinforce that, which, yeah, I feel like with our busy lives, a lot of times I'm guilty of this, that I don't take the time to reflect on like what actually happened in a given
Yeah.
day. And those anchor points of the values are so incredibly important. And I love that example of your son
Thank you.
being able to.
I have two blog posts about family values, and the second one is how to make them stick. And I was just reminded that I have an infographic, and it does start with belief
Yeah.
first. You have to believe that these values matter, and then as we talked about defining what the values are, talking about them, as I mentioned, bringing them up in everyday life, or you're reading a book, you're laying with your child at night, point out the values when you see them in the characters. Look, they have a similar value as ours, or their value is different. I wonder why. Start getting them to think about those things and then feel. We want to embrace the emotions associated with these values and talk about that. And that's building emotional intelligence. And I have a whole week on building emotional intelligence in my program. And then experience, as I said, getting out and doing the thing and then modeling, as you just said, is our kids are mirrors of us. And there's a lot of neuroscientific research that supports this with mirror neurons, and they're wired to walk, talk, act like us. Sometimes we don't like that reflection. And so, or we want to tell them because a lot of us were raised with this paradigm of kids are to be seen, not heard, or do as I say, not as I do. It's interesting that those were actual phrases that came out of people's mouths. And because if we really want kids to live out their values, we need to be living those out as well. And maybe that means we need to shift what those values are, because if you're not living them out, like you said, we got to do some self reflection there. Why am I not living this out? Maybe this isn't a value of mine anymore. Maybe this was just a value that I thought was mine because it was my parents. And I'm realizing that this is more in line with who I am.
Yeah, that's really good. And I am now inspired to do my own because it's more like my husband and I are definitely on the same page, which is a great place to start, obviously. But being able to involve the kids, they're still at the point where they don't mind the family meetings, like it's something kind of fun for them. So I would love it if you could tell us about the toolkit and then just in a little more depth, and then how everyone can connect with you, because whether it's about family values or helping with challenging parenting stuff and challenging behaviors with kiddos, I know that people are going to want to learn more.
Absolutely. The toolkit is a family values and goal setting toolkit. I used to have them separate, and now it makes sense to me to have them together. And the family values part is what I had already told you is there's a whole worksheet on reflecting, defining, figuring out how to actually act upon those values, and then a family mission statement, which we did not talk about. And just like we have mission statements for our businesses, we should for our family, or it could be a mantra or something that, again, points our family back to who we are. And then there's a whole list of 100 plus family values, so you don't have to think about them on your own. And they're divided by category. We have faith, spiritual, social, work and play, education, time spent together, character, financial, health, and entertainment and technology. I suggest and I invite families to pick one value from each of those. So that gives you a pretty broad range or in all the different aspects of life. And you don't have to go off of what's on the sheet. You can pick whatever works for your family. And then there is a poster, as I mentioned, and it has all the different categories, and the mission statement can go right in the middle. And then the goal setting toolkit is kind of a bonus if you want to plan for a family vacation, or if you want to do a big service project or a missions trip or something together as a family. There's a goal setting toolkit that really goes hand in hand with the family values, because here's our values. Now let's set some goals that we can achieve and do things and act, as I had mentioned. And there's family goal ideas on there. Again, behavioral, financial, health, activity, technology, service, relationship. It could be just technology. I was just at a retreat 2 weekends ago, and one of the moms was talking about she has a lot of teenage and adult children, and they have all decided to do a technology fast. And her teenage son has a girlfriend in California. They've been writing each other letters and not talking to each other on the phone. And they've been mailing letters. And she said it's amazing. She told her kids, you can have your phones back whenever you want. And they're choosing not to take them back because they're realizing just how much better they feel. So that's a goal that you can set, with your family around technology, or, getting the phones out of the bedrooms. It could be something simple. It doesn't have to be, hey, we're going to all start writing a snail mail to each other, even though I thought that was a really cool idea. And then there's an action plan on what you're going to do. Like, here's the goal, how often, how long, what does achievement look like? And then anticipated obstacles. What do you think we're going to have to overcome? And then there's steps, action steps to get to that goal. And this is such a great practice for whenever they become adults, because how many of us became adults and we're like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know. And then family goals, reflection. There's a whole worksheet on how to reflect on how did we do. And as you were talking, I was thinking I should probably include a reflection sheet for the family values as well. And on the reflection sheet is areas that went well, what are we proud of, areas that need improvement, and then how to be more successful. And that, I think, alone shows the value of failure and the value of resilience. And there's just so much woven into all of this whenever we get together as a family and all try to achieve a goal together.
Yeah.
And then how to find me. My website is raisingkidswithpurpose.com. I've been blogging since 2017 or 18. Lots of printables, lots of resources. I like creating pretty things that families can use with their kids, not just worksheets and printables for you to use as a mom. And I'm on Instagram whenever I'm in a good mental space. Right now, I have not been creating a lot because, again, I've been living a little bit of overwhelm, but we're getting to a place, and school's getting ready to start and all the things. So hopefully I'll get into a better rhythm. And so it's Raising Kids with Purpose, and Facebook. Everything is Raising Kids with Purpose across the board.
Wonderful. Okay, well, that sounds like an amazing resource. Thank you so much for sharing that with the listeners, and I will link to everything in the show notes. So, thank you so much for coming on the show, Adrienne. It was such a pleasure. And again, thanks for my free mini coaching session. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I did not mean to do it that way, but as you're talking, I was thinking, oh, we could dive into this right now. So you're very welcome. And thank you for having me on the show. I have gained so much value from listening to your podcast, and I've been decluttering my closet and using all your tips. So thank you for all the work you do as well.
Oh, of course.